key points to losing body fat: mass deficit, adequate protein, sustainability, meal timing, macronutrient cycling. I'm going to discuss these key points and show you how they are going to make a positive impact on your fat loss results. So a mass deficit is achieved by consuming less food by macronutrient value over time to decrease your body weight. This is taken from something called the mass balance model, which is basically the principle of adjusting food macronutrient grams in order to elicit a weight gain or weight loss result. This is a much more effective means of predicting body composition and weight than the calories in, calories out model, which is, of course, deeply flawed for a number of reasons. Around 85 to 90% of someone's fat loss results come from the reduction of food that they take in. So think, the less food you eat, the less weight you'll be. That is effectively it from a broad kind of outlay. Now, there are a number of different ways to measure or include a food mass deficit. I'm going to be going over a few of them. So you can track your macronutrient grams of food and eat less carbohydrates or less fat, or both. And in some cases, you can also reduce your protein intake. You'll need to track your food intake by using a food scale. To establish a baseline, find a food intake that best represents your daily average and see where that lands you in terms of body composition. Then begin to make adjustments to your food grams that you take in order to change your body composition. I might suggest to establish a baseline intake of perhaps 2 weeks worth of data in order to get a good, precise kind of reading. But your metabolic rate will change over time, so you need to address this yourself. However, to be critical of the mass balance model, it doesn't account for the carbohydrate insulin model. This is the idea that we take in carbohydrates which allow us to secrete insulin as needed to shuttle the carbohydrates in cells. Then from there, we'll actually begin to store more fat or muscle as that insulin level rises. However, this insulin level is associated with higher inflammation, water retention, and like I said, you're probably going to get fatter by doing it. So you have to account for this as well. Although it is mass in, mass out, to some degree it is also hormonal. I'm going to speculate that for the average person, this carbohydrate insulin model might actually account for perhaps 20% of someone's weight loss or weight gain. One caveat to this, however, is that this amount could be much greater if someone is metabolically unhealthy. In this instance, someone could be eating more carbohydrates but less overall food in terms of grams. They're finding that their weight is still going up. This is an example of where someone is going to look more closely about the hormonal impact and influence of different macronutrients on their body composition goals. The next point I want to make is to take in adequate protein. I emphasize the vital role of protein to keep muscle tissue on your body and sustain exercise intensity. I would estimate 1.5 to 2 grams of protein per kilo of fat-free mass. A middle ballpark figure is about 1.75 grams. That's just a rough estimate. It's a good starting point, I believe, for a lot of people. In the instances where the fat intake is very low or the duration or intensity of physical activity is very high, that amount could go up. As muscle damage goes up, the protein requirement will inevitably go up to keep up with that protein synthesis demand. In terms of body composition, a person can almost get away with more protein in terms of macronutrients than other particular macronutrients. The reason being is that it has a high thermic effect, which is perhaps believed to be around 25%. So that means 25% of the energy it takes to break down, digest, and assimilate protein is used in that effect. Someone can actually leverage the protein and decrease the carbohydrates and still get better fat loss results. This is what I'd say apparently causes something which is quite a phenomenon, at least when you propose this idea to the if it fits your macros or calories in, calories out movement. they believe that all calories are the same and the protein is 4 calories, carbs are 4. The reality is it could be significantly less, assuming that the body has dealt with it. It's an open thermodynamic system, not a closed one. So therefore, that isn't the best tool to use. I'll be recommending the mass balance model by tracking food intake in terms of grams, or if you're more precise, you want another metric to look at, you'll be tracking your macronutrient grams using an app or something. High protein diets can also help preserve lean muscle mass during weight loss, leading to a greater percentage of weight loss being fat. In the past, I've consumed as much as 550 grams of protein for 9 months straight. I got into true contest bodybuilding shape, eating this amount of protein with no real issues. However, I did find that I had to exercise more to burn off or oxidize the excess glucose I was taking in from my body through gluconeogenesis. I believe that this contributed somewhat to my fatigue that I had at the time. Now, getting to 4% body fat and below is exhausting. Anyone that's done that will know it's fatiguing. There aren't people out there that have achieved that and aren't exhausted. They don't exist. It is a stress to the body and not a long-term goal. But if someone wants to do it, a way they can do it is first apply the mass balance model, then increase their protein intake, then apply some more things that I'm going to be discussing in this short video. I feel that my energy when I was taking in so much protein at the time could have been better if I reduced my output and just reduced the protein. I feel like I didn't have a steady source of energy, The protein was converting into glucose, which means my blood sugar was a little bit unstable perhaps. I believe that led to some excess inflammation and also increased the degree of glycation happening, or a way of cellular aging. And my digestive system was slightly worse when I was doing that. I didn't feel quite flat stomached, I didn't feel like I digested all my food throughout the day. Felt like I was stuck in limbo. So with that being said, this brings me to my next point, which is sustainability. I always emphasize to people every time I work with them to explain their goals and speak them into action. This means giving a reasonable time frame with specific goals that can be achieved. The person asking me to help them drop 10 pounds in 1 month will have a different dietary intervention than someone trying to achieve the same weight loss in 4 months. It kind of makes sense. The level of difficulty and the tools used might be different, but the principle remains the same. They have to decrease their food intake. That is inevitable when you're trying to lose weight, at least unless you're doing a significant amount of activity compared to what you're doing beforehand. If someone comes to me and they've been on a very restrictive diet with lots of exercise up to that point, and they're not getting the results they wanted, I'm probably going to reverse diet them for perhaps 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4 weeks. And that would just be a steady increase in food intake to the point that they're feeling better. Then they can recommence their diet phase to lose excess body fat. The reason why I would do this is to upregulate the metabolism. Therefore, they've got a better jump start from when they recommence their fat loss phase. I'll be looking at both physical activity and dietary change to manipulate someone's body composition, at least in a very basic level. These are both variables or levers you can pull at different points to varying degrees. Sometimes you can do both at the same time, but the idea with a lot of what I do online with people is to do the minimal effective dose. Do what's needed, test it out. If it gets your results, don't change it. It's not until you plateau or stall, in which case I'll change the plan. Coming back to the point of sustainability, one of the issues with a diet containing significant amount of carbohydrates is that it's more difficult to stick to that diet. Your blood glucose will be inappropriately elevated at different times of the day, which means that you're going to get swings in energy, your appetite will go up, it will be dysregulated, and you'll have a harder time sticking to your diet. Hence, it makes it less sustainable. So my kind of idea is to have a diet with protein and fat, both from animal sources, eliminating all the other variables that could be at play, and keeping it really simple from there. Now, there's a reason why people don't want spikes in blood sugar. And that reason is no one I know has ever eaten one small gummy bear, enjoyed it, and not wanted another one. Your appetite will go up, which is always counterintuitive to your fat loss goals. So a key point here is to make the diet sustainable and something you can adhere to for a long period of time. Another point is the topic of meal timing. Now, my views on this will probably be contrasting to what most people think. The idea is, if you just get your food in at one point during the day, that's good enough. I'd say yes. For the most majority of people, yeah, that's good enough. But the margin of people that are trying to excel in terms of muscle mass or excel in terms of having the lowest body fat possible, they have to be a bit more micromanaging, if that makes sense. They have to do more and put more effort in to achieve that goal. What you'll notice is that maintaining very low body fat year round is very difficult, stressful and time consuming to maintain. It's commonly seen in bodybuilders where they're trying to exceed previous musculature levels each year, but they aren't willing to maintain a normal looking body fat level. They stay too lean for too long. That's a stress to the body that makes it hard for you to put on muscle. Your body notices that muscle tissue is very expensive in terms of your energy. It's got high demand, which is great for bodybuilding, be able to eat lots of food. But when it comes to manipulating your body composition, you have to be thoughtful that you have to sometimes push the boundaries a bit. So it means you have to diet a bit harder to get lean, or you have to eat a bit more food to get much bigger. But I'm talking strictly about the extremes here. People with very large muscular bodies or people with very low body fat levels. When I'm coaching someone, particularly in their phases of pre-contest preparation, I like to get a rough idea of how much food they're eating, at least if they're sticking to the plan, and also how often they're eating. How big are their meals? These are things that I take into consideration. Now, this is very individual. Some people will feel better and train better and seem to get better results having 1 meal a day. Other people like myself might need 4 or even 5 meals per day. I feel like my mindset, the way it has been taking in more meals, just because I find I think about food more. I'm more conscious of it. So having more meals in seems to do the trick. I've tried it the other way around, doing intermittent fasting of 1 meal a day, 2 meals a day. That doesn't work as well for me. I find I'm probably more likely to binge. Therefore, the diet is going to be, like I mentioned earlier, less sustainable. So you have to do what's right for you. Some people need to have a meal quite close to bedtime, perhaps 2 to 3 hours before bedtime, in order to maximize their sleep quality. So that's also something I might bear in mind. As you can kind of see, there's a vast area of individuality of this. So I couldn't give a one-size-fits-all plan for this. I'll be looking at your training metrics, your recovery, how you feel on a day-to-day basis, and that will probably help you work out how many meals you need to have each day and at least how much as well. I'd highly recommend a consultation with myself to find out what kind of meal timing works with you, then check in again in maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, reassess, and I can see where you're at and see how your progression has gone. That's a very good idea. Honestly, probably the best investment you'll make. Just to touch again on the point of intermittent fasting, so it is a tool that many people use. Many people do use it successfully. It can give you a better handle on when you should be eating and give you more food for thought, I think, in terms of what you need to do. If you start work at 9, finish at 5, okay, maybe you don't think about food in the morning, but maybe by mid-afternoon, lunchtime, you're pretty hungry. In that case, a good eating window would be that period of time. So it might be 1 p.m. till 8 p.m. or something like that. That would be a good idea. What you'll find is, as you get very lean, that might change. So don't be afraid to change your plan once you set it. You might be able to eke out some more results and have better adherence as you change and progress through your plans. I found for myself having this kind of timed approach isn't as effective as other things. The reason being is that it seems to signal some kind of binge eating tendency, which is something I'm quite keen to obliterate for good. But for me, what I tend to do is just eat when I'm hungry, and say I'm having 3 meals in one day and the next day I want 4. Okay, I'll have 4 the next day. I'll just split up the meals slightly. I have 4 smaller meals and see how it goes. And if I feel worse doing that, I'll change it back. It's as simple as that. I'm going to touch on the point of macronutrient cycling. So this is something bodybuilders have actually been using for at least 40 years, and perhaps even longer. This is a method where someone reduces their specific food requirement on a given day. So for example, they might reduce their carbohydrates or fats to increase their fat loss results. In contrast, if they're trying to gain weight, they might actually increase this, but then they'll say it's a cheat meal or something, you know, or a treat day. It's kind of the same principle. The idea is that you get slightly faster results, but minimizing the window of difficulty that you have to apply yourself in. So it all comes down to what you're eating over a given week or period of time, of course. But some people find that they can leverage their intakes or decrease their intakes at certain times, perhaps on a rest day, maybe something like that, when they're very busy and not thinking much about food. They'll decrease it and therefore they'll be able to cut body fat harder. Now, with that being said, this can affect training performance. So you probably wouldn't do this on a particular day where, you know, you need all your energy. For example, a leg day in the gym. PSMF, protein sparing modified fast as it's known, that's kind of a way of macronutrient cycling. And that probably wouldn't be effective on a leg day in the gym. If someone's in a hurry to lose body fat, macronutrient cycling is a great idea. It does work. It does work if you're in a rush. But bear in mind the difficulty level in terms of how hard the diet is will be greater if you start cutting back on food too quickly. So again, going back to the principle of minimal effective dose, you just do what's needed to achieve your goals. And if you find that you're cutting very hard, you're losing lots of fat, or perhaps you're exceeding your rate of weight loss in a given week or 2-week period, in that case, you stop doing it. Again, change the plan as it's needed. You need a good coach to help you if you're not well versed in this. I would recommend a consultation myself or Jerome Armstrong, or perhaps Professor Bart Kay will be able to guide you best. Something like a protein sparing modified fast 1 to 2 times per week will be very effective to help speed up fat loss. Again, this is more so in a period where someone's got time constraints. Perhaps they have to get ripped for a competition, I don't know, lose some fat for a wedding. You know, you have that date in sight and you're a bit behind. This is a very useful and effective tool. The way I probably set it up for myself would be to have the protein amount the same as described earlier, then just decrease the fat and carbohydrate amount if you happen to eat carbohydrates. The amount that you'd be reducing this by is extremely independent and is definitely not something I could recommend to someone online in the YouTube comment section. So to get a better picture about yourself, you probably need to try these things out and see where it lands you. You know, do some experimentation. Chances are you can't go too wrong. Just be very careful that cutting too hard can lead to vitamin and mineral deficiencies and can make you ill. So make sure you're in a good spot before you take on any kind of extreme dietary intervention. And what a protein sparing modified fast will do is essentially, when you reduce your fat or carb intake to a very low level, it allows you to free up substrate stored in your body as glucose or glycogen, and it allows you to utilize more of your stored body fat known as adipose tissue. So you're switching your fuel sources. It's perhaps more prudent to at least be fat adapted before you try doing this, because it will allow you to have a much easier time sticking to it, I think. So for the specifics of anything I've mentioned in this video, I will answer questions for a paid consultation which can be booked on compositionconsultant.com. This will be one of the most time-saving and smallest investments I believe you'll ever have in terms of developing the body you want and deserve. Thanks very much for watching. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and talk to you guys next time. Cheers.